Hey YouTube, Chris with RC Worst here. Welcome back to another great video. Today we're going to be talking to you about 7 tips to make life easier as a jet pump owner or irrigation pump owner or booster pump owner. Basically a pump that's out of the ground. So we're going to talk about that today. Let's get started. So the first tip that we've got for you is having to do with the pressure switch. The factory pressure switch is usually just fine, doesn't cause you any problems, but there's kind of a cool tip I've got for you. This is what's known as a low pressure cutoff switch, or an M4 pressure switch as it's commonly referred to in the industry. What this has is a feature that allows, this little lever here, that allows the pump to detect, or the pressure switch rather, to detect when the well runs dry, or whatever your source is runs dry, a tank, reservoir, whatever the case may be. It'll trip it out so that the pump can't run. So this is a really good investment. These are usually somewhere around $20, and they can protect your, in this case, roughly $700 pump from burning up if they run out of water or something gets closed or anything like that. So great investment. In addition to that, another cool tip for you with pressure switches, where did I put it? Here it is. If you have a pressure switch, now this one's got a black case and it probably wouldn't work well unless you used a different color, but I've got this pressure switch here that I wrote on. It's important to write on your pressure switch what your setting is, especially if you've adjusted it. Now obviously on the underside of this switch, if I turn, take this off, and on the underside, it's got the factory settings and so forth, which is handy dandy. But if you adjust this or you're operating somewhere different than where it's factory set, I highly recommend writing the pressure setting on the side. In addition to that, you can see I've got 4 dots here. Now, obviously this is kind of an arts and crafts situation, and I'll let you be the judge of how you want to do it. But the idea here is that those 4 dots correspond with the 4 screws we have here, and then you would know outgoing power, incoming power, outgoing power, incoming power. It makes it a lot easier to remember where your wires go if you're like me and sometimes forget how wires need to be put back when you take something apart that you don't work on very often. So that's a great tip for you, and like I said, you can get creative with this. Use some tape if you want to number your wires, and then you could just write the numbers on here to make it easier, or whatever you can think up. But it's a great tip to keep that straight so that you don't have to worry about it, think about it, or run the risk of making a mistake. Also, while you've got your Sharpie, it's kind of handy to write the pressure setting of your pressure switch on your tank, as well as the set pressure for your pressure tank. Be sure that you're checking the pressure in this guy at least once a year. All right, on to tip number 2. I know you've all been waiting for it. Here it is. We've got a riser pipe. Now, normally, you know, it's not uncommon to see somebody come out of their pump and go off to Never Never Land, off to the irrigation system or anything like that. But what we have here is a riser pipe, which gives us more capacity when we're priming this pump. We've got a T here so that we can have that discharge to wherever we need it to discharge, and then some open threads here. You could throw a cap on that to seal that off once the pump's primed. And this is kind of a nice tool to help you fill more water in here so that when you're priming the pump, you can work the air out of the system. An extra thing that can help you to work the air out of the system is putting a ball valve on the discharge side so that you can throttle that discharge rate back just a little bit to give the pump time to kind of catch up and work the air out of the system. On to tip number 3. So tip number 3, use a cycle guard or similar device. There's plenty of them on the market, and there's actually quite a few different variations in how they actually operate, but fundamentally they're all the same thing. Essentially what a cycle guard does is helps to keep your pump running while you're using water, and then of course allows it to shut off once you stop using water. The nice thing about that is it limits the number of cycles and greatly extends the life of the motor. So that's an excellent tip for you. On to number 4, I believe it is. I believe it is number 4. All right, so tip number 4, we've got the Sharpie at the ready again, and I recommend anytime you replace a component in your system, just go ahead and write the date that you replaced it. Then there's never any question, and in the event that it fails prematurely, you might be more eligible for that warranty, because sometimes you're like, oh, did I buy that 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I can't remember. So write it on there. You won't forget. And that includes your pressure switches, anything in the system that you want to keep track of a purchase date on, just throw it on there, and then it's a done deal. On to tip number 5. All right, so you probably all know what this is. This is a plastic bag. We're not talking about what's in it. That's secret. No, I'm just kidding. This is an owner's manual for a pump. I recommend you put your owner's manuals, your well driller's reports, any pertinent documentation, put it in a bag and stick it on the wall near your pump. Anyone that you have working on the system is going to be able to open that up and know exactly what you have, how to operate it, and anything in between. And that's extremely important to save you money in the long run. If you have somebody that you're paying hourly to work on your system, giving them all the tools they need to get the job done is going to save you a ton of money. So keep that in mind. Also, like I mentioned with the well driller's report, if you don't have one of those, I would work on getting one. Those are extremely important to have. If you were to call us here, the first questions that we would ask you is what's the well depth, and then how much volume do you need? And then that would of course correlate with what you've got on the well driller's report. But we're getting sidetracked. Don't forget, I guess that's it for tip number 5. On to tip number 6. All right, so here we are with tip number 6, and it involves our handy dandy $18 meter. Now, of course, you don't have to use this meter, and I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're a professional, but this is a cool meter because it's $18 and it does a lot of the things that the more expensive ones do. Maybe not quite as good, but still a good investment. At any rate, take an amp reading on the pump when it's installed new, or even as it is now if you don't have this information, and take that amp reading and even write it on there. I know we're getting kind of happy with the Sharpie, but don't be afraid to use it. That's an excellent tool. So take an amp reading. That way, anytime something changes in the system, you can take that reading again, and it's going to give you insight as to what's wrong. So that's a crucial step that's often overlooked, and it can save the installer or yourself countless hours and or money by doing that simple step. If you don't feel comfortable or don't want to take the amperage reading yourself, when you have the installer on site, have him take that for you, and maybe he can even possibly show you how to take that reading if you wanted to know that for yourself in the future. As always, you can call RC Worst if you have any questions on this type of stuff. We're standing by, always happy to hear from you. All right, so tip number 7, know what's in your water. You don't want to be drinking something that's going to kill you. That's not cool. Also, RC Worst actually sells water test kits in case you don't want to pay for an expensive one. This is a good buffer to give you an idea if you've got something to be concerned about. I recommend testing your water at least once a year. More if you've had potential contamination before. And in case you're wondering, the WaterSafe test kits test for bacteria, pesticides, nitrates, lead, iron, nitrites, hardness, pH, chlorine, and copper. So get one today. So that's our show. Thanks for joining us today, YouTube. Definitely great to have you here. Don't forget, RC Worst is always standing by to answer any questions that you have on any of this stuff. If you have some comments, leave those below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.